Hello and welcome to our 16th episode of our Wuthering Heights discussion and analysis. So let's jump into it straight away. So chapter 16, we're almost at the end of really the first half of the novel really now, in terms of the events and the kind of timeline that we're seeing. If that makes sense. So we've got chapter 16 here, and we have about 12 o'clock that night. This is Nelly narrating again. Was born the Catherine you saw at Wuthering Heights, a puny 7 months child, and 2 hours after the mother died, having never recovered sufficient consciousness to miss Heathcliff or know Edgar. Be careful with this, because a lot of adaptations simplify this, and they have Catherine die in childbirth, but she actually doesn't. She's already, she's dying. She has the baby, and then she was kind of dying anyway, effectively. So the baby is born 7 months. I was going to say 7 months early. That's not right. Is it 2 months early? Science, not my strong suit. That's why it's not science terms. And then having never discovered sufficient consciousness to miss Heathcliff or know Edgar. So Catherine completely died out of it. No idea of what was going on. A great addition in my eyes was his being left without an heir. So this is Nelly realising at this point that the Linton line, Edgar Linton, is doomed really, because he hasn't got an heir, because it's a girl who's been born, and that's contextual point, isn't it, about males could only inherit property. So a son would have been able to inherit the property. So this opens up the field really to what we see in the present of the novel at the start when Lockwood arrives, where Heathcliff in effect has been playing this huge Monopoly game in the area, and he ends up owning everything, but it's because he can manipulate relationships and the law to a certain extent as well. So I mentally abused old Linton for what was only natural partiality, the securing his estate to his own daughter instead of his son. So he doesn't have a son, so that's it. An unwelcomed infant it was, poor thing. So again, Catherine's start is, again, it's very difficult. Young Catherine, she's kind of neglected as a baby. We redeem the neglect afterwards, but its beginning was as friendless as its end as it's likely to be. So it also in many ways echoes the birth of Hareton as well, doesn't it, with Hindley and Frances as well. Edgar Linton had his head laid on the pillow and his eyes shut, his young and fair features almost as death-like as those of the form beside him. So really, again, it's foreshadowing his death as well. But again, it's no spoiler. If you've read the first few chapters, we know that he's dead by that point anyway, because Lockwood is, of course, renting Thrushcross Grange. Her brow smooth, her lids closed, her lips wearing the expression of a smile. No angel in heaven could be more beautiful than she appeared. And I think Bronte here is deliberately echoing the earlier assertion from Catherine, where she was cast out of heaven and ended up back at the heights. So I think there's a little deliberate recall of that, a little bit of an echo there of that. I instinctively echo the words she uttered a few hours before, incomparably beyond and above us all, whether still on earth or now in heaven, her spirit is at home with God. And really, again, whether still on earth, this really foreshadows, again, Lockwood's experience, but then also what we find out later in the novel as well, or what is maybe supposed in terms of her fate. Thinking of her as a ghost in the afterlife on the moors, which is her heaven. Because we had last chapter as well, didn't we? We had Heathcliff's idea of hell was to be still living while Catherine was dead. So there's an interesting thing where the moors takes the place of heaven or hell, depending on who's there and at what time, effectively. And again, it's all linked to this theme of Bronte subverting ideas about Christianity again as well. So we have, do you believe such people are happy in the other world, sir? I'd give a great deal to know. I declined answering Mrs. Dean's question, which struck me as something heterodox. Great word there. It's obviously Lockwood's style is more, I think in some ways you could say pompous, but definitely it's kind of, that's actually a Greek origin word there. So he's got a more kind of educated kind of lexical choices for Lockwood. And that means orthodox is when you go with the established beliefs and ideas. Heterodox is the opposite to it. So you're going against established ideas at the time. So Again, maybe a bit of Bronte's own heterodoxy, her own self, daughter of a clergyman. She was very disillusioned, I think, with the structure of the Christian church. Not necessarily with the ideas of Christianity itself, necessarily, but definitely in the way that it was delivered and the hypocrisy that was readily, I say, available. Is that the right word? On view, really, in life, and particularly like her school experience as a church school was really traumatic. So we have how much selfishness there is even in a love like Mr. Linton's when he so regretted Catherine's blessed relief. So remember, Nelly is an unreliable narrator, so again, she could be framing herself more positively here, where she's got a more compassionate Christian, more conventional Christian view of the deaths here, or the death of Catherine, and Edgar Linton's reaction to it. We just can't think, it's good that she's at peace, but he's upset because she's no longer with him, and that's the selfishness that she's talking about. Then we have the servants thought me gone to shake off the drowsiness of my protracted watch. In reality, my chief motive was seeing Mr. Heathcliff. So again, Nelly, inconsistent as a character, she often facilitates the relationship between Catherine and Heathcliff. She takes great risk here, defying the words of her master and the opinions of her master, Edgar Linton, to actually go and see Heathcliff. So she's a very interesting character, Nelly, very inconsistent. So this is Heathcliff. He was there at least a few yards further in the park, leant against an old ash tree, his hat off and his hair soaked with the dew that had gathered on the budded branches and fell pattering around him. Heathcliff, like Catherine, has a intense connection to nature, and Bronte really displays that here as well. So we have the idea of he's actually leaning against a tree, so it's almost like he's part of the tree himself in many ways, and you'll see more of that in a second as well. But he's not wearing a hat, his hair's soaked, so we've got reference to the dew, the budded branches. Then we've got these little birds there, these ouzels, passing and repassing scarcely 3 feet from him, busy in building their nest and regarding his proximity no more than that of a piece of timber. In some ways it reminds me a little bit of how they depict Radagast in the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit film, isn't it? But the idea of, it's not quite as extreme as that, but Heathcliff is so part of nature that the birds don't realise he's really a human, and they're just carrying on with their business around him. So I like that image. I think that's really interesting. I was weeping as much for him as her. So again, notice the inconsistencies with Nelly. Like here, she seems very favourable to Heathcliff, even though, despite everything that's happened, it's a very complicated relationship. But she does have a kind of maternal relationship with Heathcliff as well, because she was involved in his upbringing, as well as young Catherine and young Hindley as well as Hareton too. So it's another aspect of her personality, and really parents do have unconditional love, so maybe that's what Nelly is reflecting for Heathcliff. Like, despite everything, she still shows that almost parental compassion for him. She's the closest thing that he's got to a parent. Once Earnshaw had died, there's no one else, is there really? But saying that Heathcliff isn't exactly delightful, like taking her out for Mother's Day treats or anything like that. He doesn't treat her well, but again, she's got that maternal element to her. Again, there's more selfishness, but Heathcliff this time. And did she ever mention me? Since he never returned, her life closed in a gentle dream. May she wake as kindly in the other world. Here's some really significant, interesting lines worth making a note of, if you're keeping notes. May she wake in torment, he cried with frightful vehemence, so he's really angry, stamping his foot and groaning in a sudden paroxysm of ungovernable passion. So he's just really ranting and raging, effectively, is what this means. But there's a deliberate antithesis here between wake kindly in the other world and then wake in torment. So that's the idea of heaven, that's the idea of hell. So Bronte's deliberately created antithesis there. And why she's alive to the end. Where is she? Not there, not in heaven, not perished. Where? So that links to what we've been saying already about the connection to nature, the Moors, the kind of anti-Christian, almost kind of pagan sense of kind of spiritual attachment to nature and Catherine and Heathcliff, and it fits in with the whole kind of romantic ideal as well, which Bronte's writing fits into. Then Catherine Earnshaw, you may not rest as long as I am living. You said I killed you. Haunt me then. The murdered do haunt their murderers, I believe. Thinking of the murdered and murderers, that's polytoton. That's when you're repeating essentially different versions of the same word, different roots of the same word. So murdered and murders there. Then there's more supernatural connotations as well. And it's ironic because we do know that there are the talk of the ghosts of Catherine, particularly with Lockwood in that early episode there, but there's other references too. Be with me always, take any form, drive you mad. Look at all the exclamatory sentences you've got here. You've got and rhetorical interrogatives as well. So we've got lots of uncertainty has created this parenthesis as well. Look at all this. So Bronte is really suggesting this intensity of emotion from Heathcliff here as a character in terms of his processing of this grief that he's having for the love of his life dying there. And again, a really important one here as well. Oh God, it is unutterable. I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul. So parallel phrasing there, really important line. Again, that also emulates this incredible bond that Heathcliff and Catherine actually have, doesn't it, as well? He dashed his head against the knotted trunk and lifting up his eyes howled, not like a man but like a savage beast being goaded to death with knives and spears. So if you've watched all the other videos, you can guess what I'm going to say here before I've even said it, but I'll say it just in case it's the first video. And also, while I'm saying this, like, comment and subscribe, leave notification bell, do all those things. I should have said it at the start, but I'm saying it right now as well. Then we have, again, like predatory imagery here of animal zoomorphism, effectively, of giving him these animal qualities. Lyndon spends his days and nights there, a sleepless guardian. So this is against her coffin, which remains uncovered. And again, look at that, strewn with flowers and scented leaves. So that connection to nature for Catherine there, very important. Heathcliff spent his nights at least outside. So look, Linton inside the house, Heathcliff outside the house, so as close to nature as he could be, even though the environment of Thrushcross Grange is very cultivated and or I suppose manicured in a way, but obviously that normally applies to people. I'm just being figurative, but much more of a refined, sculpted version of nature rather than the wilds of the moors where Heathcliff is really comfortable, and Catherine as well. My master from sheer fatigue had been compelled to retire a couple of hours. So when he goes to sleep, again, Nelly facilitating Heathcliff's entrance into the house here as well, to let him say one final goodbye to Catherine. And I ascertained to have been taken from a locket hung around Catherine's neck. Oh yeah, I forgot about this, because this is where Heathcliff, it turns out, once she leaves him alone with him, Nelly leaves Heathcliff alone with the with Catherine's body, but when she comes back in, he's been interfering with the corpse, and what he's done is, I ascertained to have been taken from a locket hung around Catherine's neck. Heathcliff opened the trinket and cast out his contents, replacing them by a black lock of his own. So he switched his hair for Edgar Linton. Well, it's the other way around. Edgar Linton's hair is taken out of the locket and he's put his own hair in there as well. So obviously to be with her. And again, Bronte's emphasising symbolically that connection. Also, this is really transcending a boundary, isn't it, as well? You're crossing a boundary here of marriage as well, because that's what a husband and wife would traditionally do or traditionally have. You'd expect that, but yeah, this much more complicated primal relationship that Catherine and Heathcliff have. He's put their hair together in the locket instead of Edgar Linton. So we have her burial. Hindley Earnshaw doesn't go to the funeral himself, but he doesn't turn up, presumably because he's drinking or passed out or whatever. So not many people are at the funeral. Besides her husband, the mourners were wholly composed of tenants and servants. Look at this really romantic description of Catherine's grave as well. The place of Catherine's interment, to the surprise of the villagers, was neither in the chapel under the carved monument of the Lintons. That's much more in the Victorian rich person style. You have like a big, effectively like tombs, really, like big, big, flashy. They quite like big, flashy gravestones and tombs and all these kind of things, which you might have seen if you've ever visited a Victorian church or a church that's older than that. Then, nor yet by the tombs of her own relations outside. It was dug on a green slope in a corner of the kirkyard, that's the churchyard, where the wall is so low that heath and bilberry plants have climbed over it from the moor, and peat almost buries it. So she's buried in the churchyard, but look how she's buried so close as she can be to the moors, and the moors are coming to symbolically reclaim her and take her back to the moors, because she is an entity of the moors. She doesn't fit into this Christian churchyard so much. She's being taken back into nature. So I think that's fascinating there. Her husband lies in the same spot now. They have a simple headstone above and a plain grey block at their feet to mark the grave. So a simple grave for her there. So I will stop now and hope you've enjoyed that. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.